The oral arguments yesterday in the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health case were incredible. They went on for 2 hours. Very few people listened to the whole thing, though it actually was incredibly engrossing, mostly for the failures of the pro-abortion side and the pro-abortion justices to make their case. I listened to every minute of it. I've got the highlights for you. Here is, it actually started with the pro-life side making their arguments and the more conservative judges asking questions, but I want to start with the pro-abortion side, just to demonstrate what a thin argument they made.
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, Mississippi's ban on abortion 2 months before viability is flatly unconstitutional under decades of precedent. Mississippi asks the court to dismantle this precedent and allow states to force women to remain pregnant and give birth against their will. The court should refuse to do so for at least 3 reasons. First, stare decisis presents an especially high bar here. In Casey, this court carefully examined and rejected every possible reason for overruling Roe, holding that a woman's right to end a pregnancy before viability was a rule of law and a component of liberty it could not renounce. The question then is not whether Roe should be overturned, but whether Casey was egregiously wrong to adhere to Roe's central holding. Second, Casey and Roe were correct. For a state to take control of a woman's body and demand that she go through pregnancy and childbirth with all the physical risks and life-altering consequences that brings is a fundamental deprivation of her liberty. Third, eliminating or reducing the right to abortion will propel women backwards.
Okay, it goes on and it gets even vaguer and less grounded to reality. Did you notice what was missing in her opening argument? The Constitution, the law itself. She focuses on 2 things. She focuses on precedent and stare decisis, which is just a fancy term for precedent, and she focuses on liberty in the abstract. But what about the Constitution? What about the laws? Where is the so-called right to abortion? Where is it in the Constitution? You're saying that this new law in Mississippi, this pro-life law, is unconstitutional. Show me, where is it? She can't. She keeps going back to precedent. The precedents being Roe versus Wade and then Planned Parenthood v. Casey, which kind of affirmed Roe versus Wade, but actually kind of changed the reasoning. It came to the same conclusion, which is that there's this mythical right to abortion in the Constitution. But it kind of used different reasoning for it. So she goes back to those decisions, but she has to rely on stare decisis and precedent because the decisions were obviously wrong. The decisions were not based in the Constitution. And so she can't point to the Constitution and say, here's your right to abortion. She has to point to the precedent. But there have been plenty of bad decisions in the history of the United States. Dred Scott, right? The decisions that said that black people could never be citizens. Plenty of other a lot of decisions regarding civil rights were bad decisions. So in that case, would you point to precedent and say, well, it's precedent, so black people can never be citizens? Because it's precedent, it's stare decisis. What, do you want to overturn our whole system? No. So extremely weak arguments, and then it makes this argument and it's liberty. Well, show me the liberty. Show me the actual laws. Show me the actual rights. And then that final argument you heard her make, she goes, it'll send women backward. Oh, wow, really impressive legal argument, lady. It's not, if we don't do this, if we overrule Roe versus Wade, it'll be not very progressive. Okay, well, whoop-de-doo, who cares? Make an argument from the law. She can't do it. And Justice Clarence Thomas, probably the most conservative judge on the court, one of the most conservative judges on the court, and the longest standing member there, he hit her on this point. He said, hey, lady, can you bring it back from all this generality and actually come back down to earth?
What I'm trying to focus on is to lower the level of generality, or at least be a little bit more specific. In the old days, we used to say it was a right to privacy that the court found in the due process, substantive due process clause, okay? So, or in substantive due process. And I'm trying to get you to tell me, what are we relying on now? Is it privacy? Is it autonomy? What is it?
I think it continues to be liberty, and the right exists whatever level of generality the court applies.
Yeah, I think it's like freedom, man. Hold on. Excuse me, Mr. Justice, 1 second. Yeah, man, it's just kind of like, liberty, And so she refuses to do what Justice Thomas asks her to do, namely cite some provision of the Constitution to justify her legal claims. And I guess even more incredibly, as bad as the performance was from the pro-abortion lawyer, the pro-abortion judges were possibly worse. I'm thinking in particular of Sonia Sotomayor, who was less asking questions than making an argument herself, and it wasn't a very good one. Probably her strongest argument was to compare babies in the womb to brain-dead people.
Virtually every state defines a brain death as death. Yet the literature is filled with episodes of people who are completely and utterly brain dead, responding to stimuli. There's about 40% of dead people who, if you touch their feet, the foot will recoil. There are spontaneous acts by dead brain people. So I don't think that a response to by a fetus necessarily proves that there's a sensation of pain or that there's consciousness.
Sonia Sotomayor calling anybody brain dead is the clearest example of a pot and kettle that I've ever seen from the Supreme Court. When I was in college, I saw Sonia Sotomayor give a lecture, and my only comment on it, I don't even remember what the lecture was about, was that I and many other people who were in that room left the room thinking, not the brightest bulb in the pack, that one. And she has a reputation for being the dumbest judge on the court, and she is the dumbest judge on the court. The point she's making just isn't even true, by the way. If you are brain dead, you're not getting better. You are only being kept alive, or even appearing to be kept alive, by machines. If you are a baby in the womb, you are growing. You're going to become more and more conscious. You're going to become more and more sentient, more and more aware. The analogy is not only imprecise, it's absurd. And it shows a ghastly view from the left of babies, that they think that they're dead. It's unscientific, it's immoral, and it's not fit for the Supreme Court. Sonia Sotomayor then moves on from her silly brain dead argument, brain dead in all sense of that term, to make a political argument. She says, if the Supreme Court overrules Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood v. Casey, how will it survive the politicization?
Will this institution survive the stench that this creates in the public perception that the Constitution and its reading are just political acts? I don't see how it is possible. It's what Casey talked about when it talked about watershed decisions. Some of them, Brown versus Board of Education it mentioned, and this one, have such an entrenched set of expectations in our society that this is what the court decided, this is what we will follow, that we won't be able to survive if people believe that everything, including New York versus Sullivan, I could name any other set of rights.
Actually, the opposite view seems to be correct. Every time the court has tried to base its decision on what it thinks will protect it from accusations of politicization, it appears more politicized. This is one of the biggest problems with Chief Justice Roberts. Roberts is so concerned with protecting the institutional integrity of the court that he often seems to be ruling against his own judgment. The clearest example of this was Obamacare, but other decisions as well. And ironically, what that does is makes us view the court in a more partisan and political way, because the judges are not acting on principle or constitutional text. They're acting to try to manage the passions of the people. So that objection from Sotomayor, I think, is totally bogus. Then she moves on to what was lying underneath a lot of these arguments, which is their antipathy to Christianity and religion.
How is your interest anything but a religious view? The issue of when life begins has been hotly debated by philosophers since the beginning of time. It's still debated in religions. So when you say this is the only right that takes away from the state the ability to protect a life, that's a religious view, isn't it? Because it assumes that a fetus is life at when? You're not drawing when do you suggest we begin that life?
Your Honor, I aside from...
I'm putting it aside from religion.
I'll try to, I think there might be more than one question, and I'll do my very best, Justice Sotomayor. I think this court in Gonzalez pretty clearly recognized that before viability, we are talking with unborn life with a human organism. And I think the philosophical questions Your Honor mentioned, all those reasons that they're hard, they've been debated, they're important, those are all reasons to return this to the people, because the people should get to debate these hard issues.
How is your view anything different than a religious view? I'm almost doing a Fauci for Sotomayor here. I guess they're both from New York. Well, I guess it is kind of a religious view, but so is your view, Your Honor. If the question is, when does life begin? Now, just from a purely scientific view, we know life begins at conception. All the qualities that we would describe as being involved in life are there from the very moment of conception. But if Sonia Sotomayor is making some higher argument that you're not really alive until you speak, until you're conscious, until you feel pain, which creates all these bioethical questions. What if someone's in a coma? Are they no longer alive? Can you just kill them? Probably not. But even beyond that scientific ignorance and the philosophical and religious ignorance is even the ignorance of the role of religion. What Sonia Sotomayor is saying is that my religious view, this sort of materialist, feminist, leftist religious view, that is totally kosher, completely protected by our political tradition. But your religious view, that human life has worth and we should protect it, that is totally outside the purview of the Constitution. How dare you force your religion on me? But it's all religious. You know, we say politics is downstream of culture. Well, culture is downstream of religion. Cult and culture come from the same root word. So obviously when we talk about the morality of killing people, we're talking about religion. When we talk about the morality of taxes, we're talking about religion. Okay? You can't escape that. And what these lib justices are blinded to is their own religious views, which they consider to be common sense and totally accepted by everybody. And they're willing to punish you if you don't accept their kooky religious views. Justice Breyer did the same thing. Religion kept popping up. Justice Breyer is a slightly more intelligent lib lawyer on the court. And he kept asking the pro-life side, well, hold on. I want you to cite secular people. I want you to cite atheists in your argument.
Are there secular philosophers and bioethicists who take the position that the rights of personhood begin at conception or at some point other than viability?
I believe so. I mean, I think there's a wide array, of people of kind of all different views and of no faith views who would reasonably have that view, Your Honor. It's not tied to a religious view, and I don't think, were it otherwise, this court's jurisprudence on this issue would run right into some of its religious exercise jurisprudence.
So the pro-life lawyer there does a good job of remaining measured and respectful, but I think the real answer to this question is, who cares? Who cares what some secular, liberal, atheist philosopher thinks? Those people are idiots. They're wrong. It's like saying, excuse me, counsel, can you cite a radical leftist who agrees with your view? No, I can't, because I'm a conservative and the leftist is wrong. Hey, counsel, can you cite someone who is wrong about the fundamental question, the basic nature of reality? Can you cite someone who's completely wrong about that to back up your argument? No, I can't, because I try not to base my arguments on the thoughts of dummies. By the way, this country, America, which I know we're supposed to say is super secular and separation of church and state or whatever. America is based on the idea that there are certain unalienable rights that we are endowed with by our Creator who exists, and those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If that Creator, whose name is God, does not exist, then the premise of the country doesn't make any sense. So far from being a secular atheist country like these silly people want us to believe, we are not. The country is based on religion, and specifically it's premised on Christianity. So Justice Thomas, thankfully, Justice Thomas comes in, and he tries to bring this back down to reality. He says, hold on, wait, we're talking about abortion, right? Can we get back to the thing about abortion, please?
General, would you specifically tell me, state what the right is? Is it specifically abortion? Is it liberty? Is it autonomy? Is it privacy?
The right is grounded in the liberty component of the 14th Amendment, Justice Thomas, but I think that it promotes interests in autonomy, bodily integrity, liberty, and equality. And I do think that it is specifically the right to abortion here, the right of a woman to be able to control without the state forcing her to continue a pregnancy, whether to carry that baby to term.
The state isn't forcing the woman into a pregnancy. The state isn't forcing the woman to become a mother. The woman already became a mother at the moment of conception. The question is, does the state have the right to make laws against killing the baby who already exists? And of course the state has the right to do that. And of course we the people have the right to do that. We have plenty of laws against murder and assault and all sorts of laws, and we absolutely have the right to do that. Thomas, he tries one more time and then he gives up. He says, I can identify the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, but I can't, what right are you talking about?
What is confusing is that if we were talking about the Second Amendment, I know exactly what we're talking about. If we're talking about the Fourth Amendment, I know what we're talking about because it's written, it's there. What specifically is the right here that we're talking about?
Well, Justice Thomas, I think that the court in those other contexts with respect to those other amendments has had to articulate what the text means and the bounds of the constitutional guarantees. And it's done so through a variety of different tests that implement First Amendment rights, Second Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment rights. So I don't think that there is anything unprecedented or anomalous about the right that the court articulated in Roe and Casey and the way that it implemented that right by defining the scope of the liberty interest by reference to viability and providing that that is the moment when the balance of interest tips and when the state can act to prohibit a woman from getting an abortion based on its interest in protecting the fetal life at that point.
So the right specifically is abortion?
It's the right of a woman prior to viability to control whether to continue with a pregnancy, yes.
So Justice Thomas says, can you cite the right? It's abortion right, can you cite it? Where is it? And her answer is no. I'll translate all that legal jargon, try to dance around it. No, she can't. They had no argument. Now, does this mean Roe will be overruled? I'm cautiously optimistic. But just on the performance of the lawyers and the judges for that matter, the pro-life side made the best case that they could have, and it's an extremely strong case. The pro-abortion side absolutely collapsed. Hey man, I'm glad you liked that clip. Or lady, or whatever, however you identify. Thank you for watching that clip. You can subscribe by ringing the bell, getting all the notifications for all the future videos. And if our friends here don't want to give you the notifications, I would recommend you go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Stitcher or Google Play or wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe. Leave a 5-star review. We'll see you next time.